What's good, YouTube? And welcome to probably some of the best lighting I've had on one of these videos, the comparison from EU Megatin singles versus US. Every single holographic thanks to Tier 0 games from the EU and Yu-Gi-Oh! Daily over in the US. You can use code What'sGood5 for 5% off and to support the channel directly on both. And EU, again, famous for being a lot darker, and I'll be saying my favorites for each of at least the secret rares, and we'll see how long this video goes because it's a lot of holographics. So I do like the pop and darkness a lot more on the EU Blue Eyes, but this is reminiscent of the Legendary Collection Blue Eyes for me, so it wins a special place in my heart, but I've got to give it again to the EU, especially on this. And I think a lot of the secret rares will benefit from darker versus the pop of holographic, and it gets more questionable in ultras. Red Eyes also short printed within this set, and you can see that darkness versus the more light Red Eyes over here. The background's still doing really well on both, but I think the pop goes to the EU version here, definitely for the win. Next up, Aluber. This is one that I am going to give to the US copy. It's just almost too dark versus the darker washed out background from having all that, versus this one, it really shines and looks very, very good. We have Armed Dragon Thunder level 7. I'm sure a lot of people wish that this went to a different card. The EU copy looking a lot better to me. This almost looks too light versus the secret rare, versus the artwork really stands out versus the holographic on the EU side. Ash Blossom, I do think looks better for the US copy. The lightness versus that and the background kind of shines a lot more for this card, and the dark version just a bit too dark with that background versus the pop for me. But let me know what you think in the comment section down below. It's going to be opinionated, right? Like each card is how somebody perceives it looks when we're talking about that. Dark Magician Girl, I am going to also give the US a win on here. I think it looks a lot shinier, pops more, and the darkness here versus the circle kind of drowns out at that part, which is maybe on purpose, but the US copy, I just like it a bit more and how it looks overall. Diviner of the Herald. I'm going to give this one to the EU. I think the darkness works versus the brightness of the card. Kind of almost more of a feel of the, setting of the sun and stuff. I do like them both, though. They both look very excellent. EU's barely a win here for me. We have Dramaturge of Despia, and I do think the US wins for me. Like, the card is supposed to be a bit darker, and when you get certain angles, the EU wins for me, but you gotta move it back and forth. Just kind of being there, I really like how the leaves light up and how the background looks, but at certain angles, the EU actually wins. It's, that's subjective when it comes to these cards. I think another Ghost Girl win for the US here. I think the US version here shines brighter, that window moonlight back there, versus you do get that creepy Haunted Mansion vibe you might like more from the EU, but I'm going to give it to the US for that. And I think for most of the Ghost Girl secrets, Ghost Ogre also with that secret rare pop versus the clothes kind of being drowned out by being darker here, but she is, a psychic, kind of that ominous vibe Ghost Girl after all, but I think this one looks a lot better to me. Next up, we have Incredible Ecclesia, and I feel like maybe between the dragon looking better on the EU, but the clothes looking more washed out on the EU, it's close. It's very close. I kind of like the US one more, I think, on this one. Next up, Lord of the Heavenly Prison. And this is one I knew I was going to give to the US. It just gets washed out too much from the darkness of the print on the actual art in the EU version for me, versus it really pops in the US's version here. And I wanted to get that angle with the lights for both. Now here, I know, yep, next to the name, the US version has a little quality control issue. I think both look really great, but the pink and saturation here on the US version versus the darker neck, I think the hue just looks better for the US version of Rox Rose. I'm going to give this one, though, Tri-Brigade Kit. It kind of almost looks shadowed as she looks away from the sun on the EU version. US again, gonna take the win from me on this one. Like, I just think sometimes that darkness does come back to bite the artwork on certain cards, but will help others. And this is a card way too many of you have pulled, but I'm gonna give the EU version to the ZS Ascended Sage. I think the light version looks okay, but that darkness kind of adds that next level, and that's one of my favorite greens that ends up being for the background on this, versus kind of not as much. You gotta hit an angle to kind of get there on the US version. I'm not keeping a tally on who's winning if I'm awesome. I'm just doing one-for-one comparisons. Let's get to the fusions. Albion's going to win easily for the EU version. That darkness makes that art pop here versus that lighter red being all together. Like, it looks heat up that flare, but artwork here really benefits from the EU darkness, I think. Next up, we have Despian Quertus, and this is where it gets a bit too washed out versus looking really good on the US version. So I'm going to give this one to the US versus that EU. Looking just a bit too dark, but kind of clean at the same time. I'm going to give the US version of DPE the win here because the darkness does work for Destiny Hero, but again, it takes away from the artwork itself, I feel like. But really, it'll just come down to how you feel about which version of the card here, I think. I think both of them look really good, but the wings versus the body, wings versus body, there's a lot of difference here on the US version. We have Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, and I think the darkness benefits Dragoon here, but the background pops more on the US version, so that's going to be your call. I really actually like how it ends up looking for the EU version on this one, though, because it still stands out versus the background and its own wings. We have Rudy Rose Raggy. Yeah, people made fun of that name change enough, I'm sure. I think the EU darkness wins out huge here versus the holographic, but it can end up looking a bit tinted due to that. But I still am going to give it to the EU version, in my opinion. Drytron Mu Beta Fafnir. It's pretty close. I don't know that I have a horse in this race. I like the lightness on the artwork here, but I like the darkness too. I think it works on both. I'm going to give my first tie on that one. Evil Twin Trouble Sunny. The VTubers have plenty of representation in the 10s. I think the EU one making the darkness pop out against the Holo for the art here really works for it. It almost looks a little bit too light over here versus those city lights. So I'm going to give it to the EU version of Trouble Sunny. Underworld Goddess. Now, this is one meant to look dark, and look at that dragon pop versus the artwork on the EU version, sorry. It looks, I think that's a clear winner. I'm sorry, I'm going to just give it the screen for a bit there. That looks amazing. Versus the US version, the light helps pop the artwork, but it doesn't necessarily work for the card. EU wins by miles, for me at least. Next up, we have Branded Opening, and this is one of those ones where the darkness kind of washes out the card for me versus the US version just kind of looks way better, in my opinion, versus the holographic. Crossout Designator, I already know I'm giving to the EU version. That darkness versus the background and the shine, oh yeah. It looks way better on this card from the EU. Dual Tower, thank you History Collection for making a couple of card appearances. I actually really like the EU version and US version. It's close, but this kind of looks like you just came out of somewhere and are looking up at this tower versus the sun. It still looks really good on both. Barely a win for the EU version for me. We've got the Flunderies map. Dora the Explorer would be happy. US version looks way better to me. The saturation of darkness here, not as good in my opinion versus how the artwork looks on the Secret Rare from the US. Forbidden Droplet. This one's close for me. I really actually like how dark the EU version looks, and I love the background on the US version. I think the EU one barely wins, though. I really like how that looks art-wise. Let me get them both closer. They both look really good, though. Greater Polymerization looks almost the same. I feel like I'm getting more of a hollow swirl in the darkness on the EU version, though. But barely a difference. I'm going to give it to EU there. Lightning Storm. Also very similar on this card. I feel like the EU pops just a hair more here. Link Into the Brains, a very underrated card from the History Collection here. US version, that pink really looks a lot better in my opinion. I'm going to give it to the US version by miles. By miles. Pot of Prosperity. I think the gold on the US version, being that more popping yellow, looks better on the card for me, but might be more accurate on this card. I think I like how the US version looks more, but I can tell it's by inches. It's not by miles there. Ready Fusion, one of the most overhyped cards, still has a ton of potential. Definitely a penny stock out of the 10s. I think the US version being slightly lighter actually helps here for the artwork itself, but it's not a huge difference. I also like the popping orange here versus the darker orange. Really comes down to preference. I picked the US version for that one. Small World, a lot of people excited for the price on this one. I've made fun of that enough. I think the darkness versus the pop-up holographic gives the EU the win here huge. That's just me though. But I think the kind of darker tint works overall for this card. And the only trap in Secret Rare, we have the Rainbow Bridge. And for shiny points, I think the US one wins. I definitely think it wins, like, huge. Yeah, I gotta go with that. All right, into the ultra rares, where please let the video keep playing for watch time. I know a lot of people are here just for the secrets. The darker mode can benefit or hurt a lot of these, because like it just depends on how you like how the card looks versus the art popping. You can tell the US gets a much better art pop out of here. I've got to go with the US for this one. Although the dark does look a bit cool versus the background, the US just shines so much better and the colors look better to me personally. Next up, we have Baby Mud Dragon. Now you're supposed to be in a dark swamp. But overall, angle-wise, I feel like the US wins. But, like, I gotta give it to the US barely here as well. Next up, we have DD, Assault Carrier. And this one could go either way for me. I think the darkness actually helps a bit here. It's pretty darn close, though. We then have DDD. Let me know, you vendors, which one you would put for sorting. I've gone alphabetical, but there's slash versus period. I think the US, again, that lightness really helps the art versus it getting overshadowed on the ultra rares, where a lot of secret rares can end up benefiting from that. Unless there's holo there, it kind of takes away. I'm going to give it to the US on this one. Next up, we have Dark Eye Nightmare. And I think the darkness on here in the shadow kind of helps actually add to the art, even though, like, you know, it takes away, quote unquote, a bit. I think it actually really makes this card look way better. So I'm going to give it to EU. Dark Honest. Remember when everyone thought that was some kind of modern day collectible? I like the dark version for this too. Maybe it goes with Dark Monsters. I don't know. But I think the shading into that kind of nice hollow ring around him, it ends up looking way better for the EU. Dimension Shifter. Most people will want the Prismatic Secret Rare anyways over this. The art pops way more on the clothing and the holographic looks better though on the EU. I'm going to give this to the US just for that art pop. A lot of people didn't even know that from the comment section when I used it as a thumbnail that the eyes were covered. There's barely a face there. Flunder getting cheaper thanks to the 10s, besides, you know, buyouts on the other cards. I like both of these very, very equally. I like the darker toucan. I like both backgrounds, but I like this background just a little more. I'm going to give my second tie there. Most overhyped hand trap of, was it 2021? It's been so long since Blazing Vortex. Miradora. I think the EU one actually wins here with the darker art, thanks to the holographic pop. We have some Machinas. I think you can actually see way more of the background, but the monster looks better on the EU, where you can see way more background on the US. Next up, we've got a Man-Eater. Gonna give this one to the US and start speeding up a little here. Nibiru, though, is a big one, as you saw an otter flying there. That's next. I'm going to give this one to the US as well, I think. I do like the darker art, but like you've got to get it at an angle versus the US kind of works it. No, I really like that background. Some of these are just so close. I'm going to give that a tie as well. I said I would speed up too, right? And the bureau makes me pause. We've got an otter, split decision. I'm going to give it to the US. Next up, we're going to go with the Ferotic Guardian Sphinx. I think overall, at angles, the US looks better, but I kind of just like how the EU one looks there. We've got Rebuilder. EU won by miles here. Scrap Raptor, nice holo upgrade. I thought it already had an OTS holo. US version looks amazing versus its background. This looks a bit too dark for me. We've got Stardust Synchron. Again, I like the US versus its holo here. This is kind of an unsung hero of the ultra rares. People were waiting for that to be way more budget than it was. Remember how many secret rares they did for this deck? I like both of these a lot. I think I'm going to give the US the win there, though. Threshold Borg. EU wins. Oh my gosh, that background versus the darkness on that machine. We've got Warrock Investments. Skylar. I think the lightness helps the art pop a lot more versus the holo specifically on this card. I'm going to give it to the US. Now, this is an interesting one because I was staring, and the background is dark, and you don't get as many shades, but it's like almost a better holographic of that. Yeah, I'm going to give it to the EU for overall the thing being holographic, but the background is better on this, but most of the cards holo. Next up, we have what I would confuse for a Guard Dragon, or good old Synchros. I like the US one more for this as well. Dragon Lark. I really like what the darkness actually does for the art on here, even though it's not popping. I like what it does. I'm going to give it to the EU on that one. Abyss Keeper. See how much more the art pops on the Ultras for the US versions? It really just comes down to, does the art look good darker or not? Then I'm going to give this one to the US copy. But some of the backgrounds still look way better. This one's tough. I really like it being a darker art for the EU. Dark Infant. Again, a dark monster, right? Go figure. I am going to give it to the EU copy. I feel like I just like that a lot more. Now we have Lina, which is a light monster. And I think her art looks way better darker. It kind of looks almost a little washed. And I get it's supposed to be a very bright card. I really like that EU version. Next up, we have... Oh, I put this out of order because of the misprint. So give me 1 second to pull it on out. We have a Dark Ruler No Morph, which is the funny EU misprint, and then Dark Ruler No More. I am going to give the art to the US. Again, you'll probably want a prismatic, but misprint points. It's morphin' time. We've got I Meet Ya. I like them both. Pretty equal. Branded Bond. Albion just looks so much cooler over here. I'm going to give it to EU. We've got all these ritual spells. Breath of Acclamation. Looks way better US, in my opinion. Contract with the Abyss. Again, looks way better US. That darkness washed there versus like, almost looks like there's actual flames like making light there. Danger Disturbance. I like them both a lot. I think the EU one barely wins for me. I think the darkness works there, especially with Nessie. Earth Chant. Oh, yeah. US wins by miles. Very much so. Heritage of the Light. A little Draco Slayer action here. I think this one works really well to the EU. Yeah, I'm going to give it to them. We've got Reinforcement of the Army's Troops. See, this is where the darkness kind of works against the card. I'm going to give this to the US. Sprite's Blessing. Very, very big win for the US card. Oh my gosh. It looks so much better. Oh, look at that sparkle. It's on both, but I think this one wins by far. Synchro Overtake. I think that darkness works way better for the EU card. We've got the Breaking Rune God. Ooh, it's close. I think I like this a lot more for Obelisk, though. EU wins. The True Sun God. Again, that darkness really kind of gives the sick manga-like look to it a bit more. And whenever there's been fire, the red's almost too much. But I like both of these a lot. I think the EU wins. Zexal Construction. EU wins here. While this is shinier, I actually like the darkness of the background versus those triangles a lot. Apex Predation. Both of these are sick. Look at that lightning versus the darker art and the holo crossover there. But how the art pops and how the lightning pops here. I like them both equally. There's really good things about both of those. Dogmatica Genesis. I know, we've never looked at bulk like this, right? US wins by miles. Soul Energy Max. I like things about both of these. Gonna say tie. And then the Revived Sun God. US wins here. The red pop versus the blues. Works a lot better for the US in my opinion. And also they know what they were doing. They made the emblem holographic on Silent Magician's booty. And then the last card, which I accidentally put to the side, which you might have been asking where it is. There is Bear Brum, and I think the US one wins a lot here. See, that darkness in the darkness, it just doesn't work as well versus the art pop and the holographic on this one, in my opinion. Now, the most important super rare, we can end the video right here. Ships. Pretty equal. I think the US one pops a lot more. Dan Mari. I actually think the US one wins here for a dark monster for once, although I really like the dark swirls there. And it still doesn't kill the artwork. I'm going to give that one a tie. Flunderies. Pretty even here. It's a lot shinier, I feel like, for the US version. Is there any difference in the cardstock? Not too much. This feels a little thicker, if I'm honest. The EU version does. I like the dark artwork here versus the pop of the background, but I can't tell if that's like at all angles. I'm still going to give it to the EU version there. Ghost Girls, but in super rare this time. And I think that darkness works a lot better with super rare, even though it kind of mutes parts of it more. Like, look at how the field lights up for the US version. You don't get that sameness here due to the darkness in the holo. But I really like how the artwork looks. I'm going to give it to the EU by a hair. Reaper. Same thing. I like how the art looks a lot more, but the background looks better here. But artwork is my priority on the cards for Ghost Girls. I'm going to give it to the EU again by a hair. Then Dogwood. I think the dog looks better on the EU version. I actually think the flowers look better. I think the nun looks better. I'm going to give it to Ghost Sister EU. So on, I think most of the secrets, US one. But on the supers, the EU one there. Ice Jade. Yeah, too dark versus background. Whereas US, you get pretty much everything way more visible. Going to give it to the US on the Ice Jade. Live Twins. Oh man, EU by miles. By miles. That almost looks washed versus, oh, the pop. Yeah. by miles. Live Twin, Leela Treat, same thing. I think that artwork pops way more, which just works way better for the Live Twins. And look at the hair colors are even a bit different shades. But I like this way more. It brings joy. Uh-oh, we've got the pile starting to move. Machina Ruin Force. This is going to be a dark monster that the US wins with. The darkness is almost too much versus the background, and I see way more of the art and the holo being shinier. Gonna give it here, although the flames look better. Those dark flames look better on the EU version. Radiant Voirescent. See, light into light actually goes against the US here for me. I'm gonna give it by far to the EU. Slower Swallow. I like the US version a lot more here. I think it's fitting. Traptrix Vesicula. I feel like I'm in a dark forest on this one. I feel like there's things I like more about this, but this honestly feels like you're where the artwork and cards should be. So I'm going to give it to the EU. ZS Armed Sage. EU by miles. By miles. That darkness for the art works so well. ZW Pegasus. I'm going to say EU by miles again here. We've got the Masquerade. I actually like the US one here more. The pop versus the darkness versus the flame versus this getting kind of like lost a bit. Gonna give it over to the US. A couple dark monsters finally winning over in the US. White Knight of Dogmatica. Oh, it looks so sick over here. I gotta give it to the EU. Even though you lose a bit, I think it wins by far. Binary Blader. Pretty even for me. No clear winner. I kind of like the EU a little more if I had to pick one. I like the US one here way more. Too dark into the dark blue. This pops. Definitely the US version. Sun Avalon Daphne. Again, I'm showing these all so you guys can make your decision. But for me, I'm just making my opinion off the cuff. And I think the EU wins by miles here. Look at how light green and kind of washed that looks versus actually getting the detail versus the background. Traptrix. Again, I'm going to give it to the EU on the Traptrix. Although the plants at the bottom look barely better on the US. The rest of it looks all better over there. Now this one, I really like both of these. I actually stared at them for a bit. It reminds me a ton of Super Bookamoon from back in the day. I'm going to give it to the US by a hair. But I really actually like how this looks super rare. Takes me back. Goki Finishing Move. You like feet? US version barely. Hi, Ritual Art. Again, US version. You actually can see a little more of what's happening there. And the holographic. I feel like it's way shinier for the US on some of these cards. Like right here, you can kind of tell that darkness versus a more muted shine versus how bright. That's not just the lighting. Like, let me bring it over here, right? Versus, look at that difference. Definitely giving it to the US on this one. Now we get to the traps and near the end. Beast King Unleashed. Really sick artwork. Gonna give it to the US here. Magical Cylinders. Gonna give this one to the EU. Screams of the Branded. Every time we've had Albion, it's been a win over here. But due to the holographic, I think the US finally gets an Albion win. Yeah, with that Mirror Force-like effect. It's very close. Very, very close, but I think US wins. And finally, Virtual World Gate. Yeah, I'm going to give the US the win here as well. I definitely like it and how the dark versus the light contrast goes. So, thanks for watching the video. That has been every holographic from the Megatins, EU on the left versus US over here. Again, huge shout outs to Tier 0 and Yu-Gi-Oh! Daily for the cards. Let me know what you thought of everything, and I do again think this is the best lighting I've had for this video. So let the sponsors know if you want to see more videos like this, and huge shout outs to them for the cards for the comparison. Thanks for watching, everybody.